Chapter 17. The Idea. "I can't believe they're going to separate us," said Howard as the boys walked home from school that afternoon. George said nothing. He was thinking. He knew there was a way to solve this problem. "I can't believe I have to spend an extra year at that school too," Howard moaned, trying not to cry. "The worst part is that I totally studied. I know this stuff. I could have probably gotten straight B's if I had taken those tests yesterday." "That's it," cried George confidently. "We can fix this." "But how?" said Howard. "They won't let us take makeup tests." "Who says we have to take makeup tests?" George replied. "Let's take the real test." Howard looked suspicious. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Melvin said he kept his time-traveling squid thingy in his garage." "Wait," said George. "Let's borrow it and go back in time to yesterday morning. Then we can take those tests like we were supposed to. Problem solved." "No way," Howard protested. "Whenever we travel around in time, bad stuff happens." "What could be worse than being in different grades next year?" George countered. "Do you really want to spend an extra year at that school?" Howard didn't have an agreement on that. "Besides," said George, "we're only going back in time one day. How could anything bad happen in just one day?" "I guess you're right," said Howard. George and Howard turned around and headed over to Melvin's house. Luckily, Melvin's garage door was open. Cautiously, the two boys sneaked inside and looked around. And there, standing in a corner beside a box of Lindstrom 7-inch Ginley wrenches, was the glow-in-the-dark time-traveling robo-squid suit. "We shouldn't be doing this," Howard whispered. "We are trespassing and stealing." "Hey, Melvin started this whole mess," George reminded Howard. "We're just fixing it. Besides, we're not stealing. We're just borrowing." Against his better judgment, Howard helped hoist George up into the cockpit. Suddenly, the robo-squid suit powered up and began to glow. A few moments later, the controls were all set. "Okay," said George. "Let's go back in time and take those dumb tests." He picked Howard up with one of his glowing tentacles, took a few steps forward, and pressed the start button. The glow-in-the-dark, time-traveling robo-squid suit began shaking and sputtering as it shifted backward in time 32 hours. A blinding bar of light flashed suddenly, and George and Howard arrived bright and early yesterday morning, just in time for school. As Howard helped George climb out of the cockpit, he noticed that there were now two glow-in-the-dark, time-traveling robo-squid suits. "Hey," said Howard. "How come there are two glow-in-the-dark, time-traveling robo-squid suits?" Said George. "I guess that one in the corner is the one from yesterday. When we went back in time, we created a duplicate time machine." "Oh," said Howard. "Melvin should thank us." "Yeah," said George. "That was very thoughtful of us." George and Howard went back through town as fast as they could. Soon they were scrambling up the steps of Jerome Horace Elementary School. "This feels weird," said George. I've never been so happy to go to school before. Or to take tests, said Howard. And indeed, it was a happy school day for George and Howard. They took all of their tests, did pretty well on most of them, and never had to deal with anything super or secrets again. At least not until that afternoon. Chapter 18. Our Doppelgang. That afternoon, when George and Howard got home, they climbed up to their treehouse to check on Quacker's eggs. George tried to push the door open, but something was in the way. Hey, there's a backpack blocking the door, said George. He reached in and put it toward him. This looks like my backpack. What's going on up there? Asked Howard as George rummaged through the backpack. My papers, my books, my lunch from yesterday, said George. This is my backpack. It can't be, said Howard. You're wearing your backpack. George pushed the treehouse door open and looked inside. Oh, no, said George. Howard climbed up next to George and looked inside the treehouse. There, sleeping at the table, was Howard himself, and next to him, sprawled out and snoring on his beanbag chair, was George. I told you something bad would happen, cried Howard. Shh, said George. Don't wake us up. I don't understand, Howard whispered. How come we're here? Well, it kind of makes sense, said George. We just went back in time to yesterday, right? Right, said Howard. Well, where were we yesterday? Asked George. We were right up here in the treehouse, sleeping and... Oh, I get it, said Howard. This is us from yesterday. Yeah, said George. Remember how we accidentally created an extra robo-squid suit? Said Howard. I guess we accidentally created an extra George and Howard too. Perfect, said Howard sarcastically. Chapter 19. The Pets. While yesterday's George and Howard slept, George and Howard tried to figure out what to do next. How are we going to explain this to our parents? Asked Howard. How are we going to explain this to ourselves? Asked George. Yesterday George yawned and stretched as he walked over to his beanbag chair. He glanced at his pocket watch, then closed his eyes to go back to sleep. Suddenly his eyes shot open.